Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Janice R. Love, also known as the First Lady Coach. And I equip seasoned pastors' wives to have the clarity, the confidence, and the courage to walk boldly into the destiny for which she was chosen by being perfectly who God created her to be. Welcome to my Pearl Power series. Let's go. And again, this is the Pearl Power Holiday Series. I second that emotion. How to manage your emotions the healthy way, God's way. And tonight we are going to be focusing on from shamed to selected. Once again, tonight we are going to be focusing on for session number 2 from shamed to selected. All right, let's get going here. Now, last night I did remind you that emotions are natural. Everybody has emotions. They are natural, they are instinctive, and they are a state of mind deriving from our circumstances, from our mood, or from our relationship with others. Now, again, during this Pearl Power series, we're going to be focusing on 6 basic emotions. Those emotions are fear, anger, sadness, surprise, joy, and love. So, again, tonight we are going to be focused on shame. Now, shame is part of both the sadness and the fear because it elicits a whole lot of emotions on us, within us. And shame is one of the toughest ones to deal with because of the way we often feel. So, Brene Brown, who's a famous psychologist, she's also a researcher, she has her own definition of shame, which I'd like to share with you tonight because it clearly lets you know how difficult and how challenging the emotion of shame is. So, her definition says the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. It's something we experience when we've done something, when we fail to do something, and it makes us unworthy of connection. I'm going to read that one more time. The intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we experience, something we've experienced, something we've done, or something we have failed to do that makes us unworthy of the connection. Can anybody connect with that definition? But if I simply define it in a couple of words, it means that we have a sense of smallness. We feel like we are worthless, and we feel like we are powerless in any given situation. But mostly we have that feeling of feeling like we are unworthy. Can anybody second that emotion? Can anybody second the emotion of shame? So when you think about shame, what does it feel like? You often feel embarrassed. You often would feel self conscious. You might feel humiliated or that things that you are bad in some kind of way. There's might be some guilt there, but guilt and shame are totally different. Guilt might be, I did something bad, so I got forgiveness for it and I can move on. But shame is when we feel bad, right? When we feel like we're unworthy, we feel like we feel small, we feel like that we cannot be accepted, okay? So shame means I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I don't matter. I'm broken. I'm bad. You feel stuck and you feel like it won't get any better. Can anybody second that emotion for the feeling of shame? So, what does shame look like? Shame often causes your face to blush. So, in any given situation, you might be completely red from face down to your neck. Typically, if you are feeling shame, you have a you avert your eyes, meaning you don't want to give anybody any eye contact. You really want to be invisible when you're dealing with shame. Also, it can increase your body temperature because of that nervous feeling. And it could lead to you sweating. You know, when we get nervous, we end up sweating. We also we also get a dry throat, is which is what I have right now. Forgive me. So can you second that emotion of shame? Again, it's the feeling. Let's say you trip and fall. Okay. That feeling when you trip and fall, that you're more worried about somebody and you feel that embarrassment than you are about being husband all the time. If I trip and fall, I'm just gonna lay there and play hurt because I with the embarrassment or the shame. It's we just feel unworthy of love. You have done something wrong. And again, it could be something that you did it because you're inherently bad. Maybe you don't know something due to the feeling of shame. Ever been in church? Asked you a question that you cannot answer, and somehow you feel. And we have that shame that was within us. Let's so we get unwanted exposure or attention. Maybe it's because of something we have worn or something that, again, we have said where we get don't want to have. And again, it can happen. Can anybody second that emotion? Of course, I like comments, so definitely tell me if you can second that emotion. Just simply put in the chat, I second that emotion. So let's move forward. Last night we talked about Mary, right? And we talked about how Mary found a safe place in her cousin Elizabeth. We also know that because of Mary's stay with Elizabeth, she was rejuvenated and she was ready to take the journey of being the mother of Jesus. She moved forward with anticipation. Remember, she started with anxiety, and as a result of the angel and as a result of visiting her cousin Elizabeth, we know that she came out with anticipation. But did you know, even while Mary was dealing with all of her things, Elizabeth had her own situation going on. So tonight we're going to be talking about Elizabeth, who is the mother of John the Baptist. Now, let's talk a little bit about her story. It started, remember, it starts with a trigger. Oftentimes, when we feel the emotion, and this emotion being shame, it starts with a trigger. So, Elizabeth had plenty of reasons to be ashamed. All right. So, well, let's talk a little bit about what was going on with her. I started getting excited and I was going to jump ahead, y'all. I'm not going to do it. The first reason she had to be ashamed was the fact that she was barren. Now we know in biblical times it was an honor, it was a sense of pride if you could become a mother. But if you could not be a mother, if you could not have children, if you were barren, you were simply disgraced. You didn't have any respect. You weren't honored or you were not esteemed. In fact, you were usually humiliated. So the first reason, again, why she was in shame was because she was barren. Now let's take it one step further. She not only was barren, but now she was at the age where it was in her mind impossible to have a child. So now she's beyond the age of childbearing. So that causes even more shame because again, maybe during the years where you could have a child, you tried and tried and tried and you just kept hope alive. But once you get to that point where it seems impossible and it's beyond anything that you can do, then the shame, I can imagine, only got worse. Then, thirdly, the reason why she felt shame was because she was married to a priest. And again, think about the shame that she dealt with just going to church or going to any setting. You know, church people, again, can be the worst ones, and they will make you even more ashamed. So I could imagine people were talking about her. Mm, the priest's wife can't get pregnant. Mm, must be something wrong with her. She must have done something. Y'all know they were talking about, just like when we are dealing with shame for maybe things we have done, said, or again, when we feel unworthy, it is often because of some of the shame that we allow others to give us, because we are often worried about what other think. That's where this whole shame comes from, is because we feel less than, we feel like we can't be loved, we feel like we can't connect with others. And again, so a lot of that stems from the fact that others have judged you, right? And you don't even want to be bothered with it. So again, she had several circumstances going on. She was barren, she was old, and she was the wife of a priest, which one would expect that she should be blessed and not cursed. All right. So you already know what kind of expectations they had of her. So even in my own life, again, there have been numerous times where I have experienced shame. So I can definitely second that emotion. But when we are experiencing shame spiritually, it can get the best of us. So when we are experiencing shame, we can forget that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We can reduce our own self image. We can feel unloved, and we can feel like God has totally forgotten about us. So imagine what Elizabeth felt, feeling ashamed that she could not have a child. And again, being the wife of a priest, and she perhaps even felt like, especially after praying, she had been praying for years for a child. So you can only imagine that she felt like God had forgotten her. So once again, can you second the shame of emotion? Can you second the emotion of shame? I tell you. All right. So again, have you ever felt small? Have you ever felt unworthy? Have you ever felt inadequate and felt like there was nothing you can do about it? Have you been in an Elizabeth type situation? Praying doesn't do it. Fasting doesn't do it. Hiding doesn't do it. You know, all the things that we do when we desire God to move, none of that was working. So how did Elizabeth go from shame to selected? That's what we're talking about tonight. How did Elizabeth go from shame to selected? Well, I have broken down her experiences, broken down her life story, and let me tell you what we can learn from Elizabeth today. Here's what we can learn from Elizabeth. There is an answer, and it's called proof. Proof. So when you think about what Elizabeth experienced, it was the proof that brought her where she needed to be. So let's break down proof. Proof means to persist, to receive the miracle, to come out of the shadows, to own your assignment, and to embrace favor. So we're going to go through these one at a time so you can clearly see how Elizabeth used proof to go from shamed to selected. So first of all, persist. When we think about persist, it means to press on. And think about, again, how long Elizabeth had been dealing with this. Now she was in old age, but she kept persisting. We know a little bit about Elizabeth, that she came from a noble family. So she was good people. We also know that she had served. She had served beside her husband. She had supported him in his priestly duties. So she had committed herself to supporting and helping him in his walk, and staying staying beside him despite the fact that they could not have children. So when you persist, you also seek to understand, Romans 8:28. Because again, when you understand Romans 8:28, it makes your situation a whole lot easier to persist because you know that all things are going to work together for your good. So again, step one would be to persist. And we saw exactly how Elizabeth did this. So let's move to step two. Step two is to receive the miracle. Now, we know the story of what happened. The angel Gabriel approached her husband and told him that they were going to have a child and that the child was going to be the forerunner for Jesus. We know that Zechariah did not believe it and he asked for a sign, proof, right? And so what happened was the angel closed his mouth so that he couldn't say anything until the baby was born. So imagine in your mind, imagine in your mind when he got home and he tried to explain this, he had to be excited because they were going to have a child and that they were the chosen couple to be the forerunner. He had to be excited. So he had to share this information with Elizabeth in order to get her to do what she needed to do in order for them to have a baby, right? So she received the miracle. When her husband came home and told her about it, she received the miracle. And again, y'all think about it. They old in age, they had given up, and you think that it was easy for him to come home and explain, hey, babe, we need to do this because we're going to have a child, right? So she received the miracle. She didn't say, please, we've been waiting all this time. She received the miracle. Then she also, when Mary showed up at her door, we already know what happened. The baby leaped in her stomach. And because she was about 6 months pregnant by then, the baby leaped in her stomach and she received that miracle. She received the miracle that Mary had come to see her because their babies would be working together for the kingdom of God. So the second thing, once again, is to receive the miracle. And again, even when we are dealing with shame in our own lives, we just have to receive the miracle because it's coming. Now, step three is about coming out of the shadows. So once Mary had left Elizabeth's house, Elizabeth came out. In fact, it was time for her to have the baby. She came out of that shadow. She told her story. She turned those negative thoughts that she perhaps had about herself, about her plight, about God forgetting her. All those negative thoughts turned to joy. So she emerged with joy. When they asked the child's name, remember, after she had the child and they asked the child's name, she told them immediately the baby's name should be John. Of course, they didn't believe her. See, that's how they do women. They didn't believe her, so they had to go and ask the husband what the name should be because they thought it should be Zechariah Jr. Anyway, but she emerged out of that shadow. She spoke up when they asked her what the child's name was. So she came out of those negative thinking. She emerged out of there to come out of those shadows of that negativity, and she emerged with joy. All right, this is getting good. And then finally, the next step is that this isn't the final one, it's another one. This is part of proof, remember? Step 4 is to own your assignment. So again, once Elizabeth found out that she was with child, and she also found out that Mary was coming to visit her, she owned her assignment. When Mary got there, she did exactly what she needed to do to encourage Mary. Think about the conversation that they had. What are people going to think about me? How am I going to manage this? What do I say to my husband? Think about the conversations they had. Elizabeth owned her assignment. So again, when we want that proof, right, to come from shame to selected, we have to own the assignment. Once that assignment is clear to us and we are on that path, we have to own it. Then finally, we have to accept the favor. Now, once Elizabeth had her child and they named him John, and everybody knew the blessing that God had placed on her, here's what Elizabeth said. She said in Luke 125, and I'm going to read this from the NIV, "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days, he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." So when she had this child, she proclaimed with a loud voice that the Lord had done this for her. She embraced her favor. In the days, she has shown his favor and taken away disgrace from among the people, taken away her disgrace. So isn't that beautiful? Again, so the final step in proof is that we have to, again, accept favor. So again, as we have talked tonight about how you go from shamed to selected, we already know what shame feels like, but do we know what selected feels like? Selected is when we clearly can see that we have been chosen, that we have been favored, and then we can have that joy again, because think about where you are when you're in shame. Then to finally know that you are chosen makes all the difference in the world. You receive that favor. So many of you may be dealing with the situation of shame. I tell you, many of the things that I have discussed throughout our proof are things that we discuss in my coaching program, where I help you to emerge from those shadows of that negative thinking that often plagues us once we are dealing with shame. So, again, it's time to emerge out of those shadows, and it's time to accept the favor that God has in store for you. So if you would like to hear more about what it means to be chosen, definitely check out my website, which is janicerlove.com. I would love to have you visit there and learn more about what it means to be chosen. Because again, when you are chosen, that means you are selected. So that's how you go from being shamed to selected.